So, AI, right? We can't put it back in the box. Not a day goes by when there's not a new headline on how it's revolutionizing or taking over another sector or another industry around us. Whatever you feel, one thing is true that artists are and have always been disruptors and provocateurs, using these tools to break the box and make work that couldn't have existed before. Work that's more ambitious, more immersive, more technically complex than their budgets would have previously allowed. And that critically questions our ever complex relationship to tech.
I think we're also just turning easily to LLMs these days, for things that we wouldn't have back in the day. But I think there is still this uh, need to structure robust arguments, sort of fact check, and clearly the creative AI tools are amazing as a kind of partner to have ideas with, to storyboard. There's so much time saving. I recently did a sort of virtual production course, and there's so many parts of that pipeline you can now start planning so much earlier. So in many ways, it's fantastic. But I do think you need to be aware of what some of the terms and conditions are.
The things that we made for this project that I just would never have tried to make in the first place because it would have taken months. But now with AI coding agents, I can sketch something out and get it working in a couple of days. So I've not written a line of code in the last year, I think, because I'm now just a AI agent manager, which is kind of like what my career would have gone to as a developer. That you tend to promote yourself to a manager and start managing younger people who can work faster. So now I'm doing it with AIs instead.
I still don't think that I personally am ready to make a feature film or even a short film using that technology, and it still does have serious concerns, ethical concerns. That's why I say we really just still have to be very careful and very judicious in how you're using this, and also careful about, if you make something that you like, expect that if you release that, you're going to get a lot of pushback. And that's just part of the game. I'm not particularly interested in being publicly cancelled. So I keep it to a kind of, I'm very mindful about my use of it and sharing what I think about it.
I also recently made a mixed reality experience last year called Built by Sound, which was in Bradford. And we did use AI in various ways for kind of workflow. So in one instance, we brought some archive photographs to life. We kind of talked long and hard to the archive that supplied them. They were kind of portraits from the Bellevue collection, for very well known. People feel very close to those portraits. It's a big story in Bradford. And so, we talked to the curators about the ethical use of that. But we also said we would only do it if we could find a living relative of those people in the photographs. So a long old process, but going through sort of reams of archives to then trace someone that they might have had contact for, to then get their approval, showed them how it was being used and the context, etc. And we did it that way. And then similarly, we use like Move AI, which, in terms of motion capture, is sort of a game changer if you're doing something fairly basic. And we just needed, a bit of kind of movement of characters and things. But, we just did that in the studio on our phone to get some kind of character skeletal movement. So I think there are these areas where you can save an awful lot of time. It's just, again, just thinking about the bigger picture, and we had kind of policies in place talking about how we were going to use AI through the whole process.
Kind of looking at from my own experience working in industry for 2 decades, that we're actually the ones who standardize and optimize these tools, who join together pieces of software that don't necessarily talk to each other. We bug fix dodgy hardware, and we forge functionality from all the half broken software and hardware ecosystems. So from that perspective, we didn't just build AI models with our work. We also built all the digital tools. We built game worlds and metaverses and creative suites, and they've all been sold back to us. So in that sense, AI is sort of just the climax of a longer process of extraction. So maybe not the next frontier of industrialization, but the inevitable conclusion of a bigger digital story.
People are desperate for connection as well. I think they're desperate for live experiences and being with people and live music and, and painting and actually the kind of act of like something made by the hand. And I'm not saying necessarily that you can live off that all the time, depending on what level of artist you are. But I feel kind of optimistic that there will be a kind of resurgence into actually appreciating that handmade thing. I do feel there will be a kind of backlash at some point, or at least interest groups which, really want to kind of explore that.
It's up to all of us to read, to question, to use our discernment, to experiment, to break the box, to our artist activists out there, to lobby for better legislation, to look for what's missing and to call it out when we find it. The choices we make will define how we engage with this technology or choose not to.